I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're taking a look at Anthony Manna's captivating novel. It is called Loukas and the Game of Chance. It takes readers on a journey through a reimagined Greek folktale. When Loukas, a flute player, befriends a mysterious snake, he is rewarded with fortune, but later loses everything due to greed and pride. To restore his honor and regain his loved ones, he embarks on a quest filled with suspense and strange creatures, beautifully illustrated with pen and ink drawings. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Writers Branding for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Anthony, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. Good to be here. I'm happy to be talking
Well,
about my life and my book.
well, it's wonderful to have you on the show. The book is very inspired. So let me ask you, what inspired you to reimagine a Greek folktale?
Well, in a sense, what happened was, I'm a retired university professor of literary arts, and I wound up in Greece
Mhm.
on an assignment, and I was supposed to stay for a semester, and I stayed for 2 years
Yeah.
because I became intrigued with the stories. You don't spend a lot of time in Greece without hearing stories. People love to tell their stories. And so with my colleague, Sula Mitakidou, I started researching, telling her that I would love to translate, reimagine, reshape, redefine some of the stories to bring them to an American audience of children and young adults. And that's how it all happened. So we took a lot of time during our academic responsibilities as well, because I was at the university there.
Mhm.
And out of that came uh, several books, including an anthology of 20 stories.
Mhm.
And inevitably, I found a story called The Snake Tree, and it haunted me.
Hmm.
And I think that what's happened sometimes is, as a writer, stories come to me rather than I go to them.
Yeah.
And this particular story just haunted me. The relationship between the main character and the snake, etc. So I thought, and also just the loss and gain, the separation, and rejuvenation in a sense. What can I do to the story to elaborate on it? So what I did was I set out to develop a full length, um, and in a sense, a full length novel,
Mhm.
at least a short novel, um, based on this tale. And I just let my imagination. We just talked about it. Take me to places that I didn't. They were not in the story. I invented characters, like the snake itself became a main character.
Mhm.
And in the original folktale, the snake dies very quickly. But I carried on with this because I loved the relationship, the friendship, the communication between these two characters, Loukas and Lambros, which he named the snake. And I thought, in a sense, what I think what I was witnessing there, and I started thinking about it later, is that here's the snake that comes almost like an immigrant
Mhm.
foreigner into Loukas's life as he's playing his flute
Yeah.
above on the stone wall above the sea, and he accepts him. And so I thought, I love that idea, that here is a person outside of our realm
Mhm.
coming into this place, and we can accept him or her,
Yeah.
it. you know
Yeah.
so so then what happened was I just took off with it, and I elaborated on it. I developed a keeper of the forest, which when I go into the schools to talk about the story, most of the students really love Keeper of the Forest. They think he's very weird, strange, bizarre, but they see the relationship again. He's like a sage,
Hmm.
and he brings a lot to Loukas to help Loukas develop himself on his journey, the very difficult journey. Um, and I think what I was really after basically was to um, try to introduce the concept that life can get very, very messed up. That failure is inevitable. We make mistakes. How can we survive this? And most of the time when I'm talking to children, and when I'm talking to most of the children I deal with this particular book would be in middle school,
Mhm.
and they capitalize on that. They talk about that a lot, about how he survives, um, and what he needed to do to survive, that he reached out to destiny, sun, moon, which is really audacious in a sense because that's their characters way beyond the realm,
Yeah.
and that's where it all led. So it was it took a lot of time, and I think that's something that I talk to children a lot about too. When I show them the manuscript, uh, slides of the manuscript, to let them know that it's a commitment and that it's not always easy. The road can be rocky. The road can be very, very smooth, and you can move very, confidently into the story world that you're building.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't happen that way. There are struggles that you inevitably face. And so I like to talk to kids about this, and then we'll do a writing exercise and they'll see, that yes, okay, so one of the exercises that I've developed, which I call they all wound up happily ever after, or did they?
Mhm.
And so we take some of these characters, and say, all right, so and they'll invent a character and they'll talk about, oh no, look what he ran into, look what she ran into, and we get into that a little bit. It's very interesting to see what they can, so I'll leave them with that assignment and I'll come back in a couple of weeks or so, and we'll share that kind of writing.
That's great. It's great to have them use their imaginations that way to explore the journey of a writer as well, and to look at the repercussions of the character's journey afterwards. The happily ever ending part. I like that. Is there ever a happy ending? Who knows? Let me ask you this. Tell us about the artwork in the book.
Well, yeah, Donald Babish is a dear friend and my partner. And Donald, taught elementary school art for 38 years.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, he was working on his art, and that's a beautiful thing for an art teacher to do because then the energy, just, is sent off to the kids,
Right.
So, and then eventually, he thought he went to NYU
Mhm.
and developed, did a master's in art education, and that changed his life. I mean, of course, I mean, he was surrounded by people who could take him to the Met and take him to all sorts of galleries, and the study became um, that he developed his confidence very much so in those years, and he when I came to him and I said, look, I've got this manuscript. I don't know if you want to take time away from what you're doing now, because he had retired by that point, just as I had.
Mhm.
And he was beginning to do fiber art.
Mhm.
And he was very much into creating from materials, pieces that were astounding. As a matter of fact, the first one he did was an honorable mention in an art show in San Francisco. And so I said, "Do you want to take time to do this? And what do you think of?" And so we sat down. And what was so wonderful about this is that very, very different from the other books that I've done, where you never meet the illustrator.
Mhm.
And that's pretty inevitable in the publishing world and, in the major companies. I mean, um, that you don't collaborate because it would probably slow the process, or the art director in a particular company, like I published with Random House, the art director there within the children's department wants to take over the his or her imagination. And so but to sit down with Donald Babish and work through the story and talk about the characters, and he was seeing a lot of spiritual content in terms of what Loukas was facing, that he had to face about himself in order to come to understanding of his being, in a sense. I hate to put it that way. It sounds so esoteric, but it's not really, because that's exactly what happens. And so we sat down, he sketched, we went back and forth. He kept playing with the snake, and I've got lots of in my archive. Some of the early illustrations were very, I guess they were kind of flat, and so he took off with that. And you see this on the cover of the book, that he developed it into a character. So Lambros the snake becomes a central character, and because we talk back and forth about it, and also Keeper of the Forest. That that developed because I collaborated with the illustrator. I had created a character that was more like a magician.
Mhm.
And so the illustrator said to me, everybody wants to create a magician. Who could you create differently? And so I sat around thinking about that for quite a while. And all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, this is a forest. Let me create, and I don't want to call it the keeper. He's keeper of the forest. That is his domain, over which he controls and over which he is loved, because he takes good care of nature and the critters that live there. So we went back and forth, and inevitably, we decided on 10 illustrations, um, pen and ink. And I just always felt that he captured a real sense, the sense of the subtext of the story.
The images absolutely complement the story and enhance the experience for the reader, which I guess was one of your goals.
Oh yes, uh, I always like to stop at that point and tell people that at the university, I was, one of my assignments was to work with future teachers and veteran teachers in the language arts. And so the courses that I developed, one course that I developed that became a favorite for many students was the Children's Literature Survey. And the same thing with young adult literature, sometimes called adolescent literature. I developed undergraduate and graduate courses. And so it led me into study. Now, I like to tell people, when I was growing up, I did not have books.
Mhm.
We were a survival family in New Jersey,
Mhm.
and um, pretty much of an immigrant way of thinking, because we had to find ways to make it. And so books were not available. My father was a writer, a journalist, as a matter of fact, but
Mhm.
I just didn't have books. So when I plunged into children's literature when I was working on my doctorate, I read my main advisor said, "You have a lot of work to do if you're going to be teaching these courses, because you don't have a background." He said, "So you've got to read every day. I'm going to assign you every day to read at least 10 books from the canon,
Wow.
be they classical, be they contemporary, be they modern." And I did. I took off and I fell in love with the voices. And I've never stopped. It's been forward the whole time. So um, I think that uh, let's get back to that question that you asked me.
That the artwork complements the text and helps the
Yeah, and
reader
so
have a
that's,
fuller
yeah, right, and
experience.
that's what you learn. That's one of the things that you learn, is that when you're studying children's literature, um, you study illustration,
Mhm.
and you study writing. Writing with Pictures is one of the books that was written by Yuri Shulevitz, one of a Caldecott Award winner. Writing with Pictures, and that's so true. That you're going back and forth in two imaginations, and how do they blend, and what do they say to one another, and how do they complement one another. And so I spent a lot of time studying illustration in order to be able to become an authority, as a professor at a university. So uh, um, at first it was a little bewildering.
Mhm.
Then it became miraculous to be able to see so much good artwork.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your journey as a writer.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking about that. I think that because I decided to go into the academic world, of course, and then of course to go into a PhD business as a researcher, that I was expected to write within the realm of academic writing. I was
Mhm.
to publish my research. And what was so beautiful about that is most of my research was I collaborated with classroom teachers. And a lot of what I was doing there was taking the literature and dramatizing it with kids. And so um, my academic writing was going, and I was developing my academic writing in order to keep my job. And then
Mhm.
eventually I said to myself, I wonder, I've been studying story and the construction of story for so long, and whether it was poetry,
Mhm.
nonfiction works, that is informational books or whatever, I wondered, could I do that myself? And when I was in Greece, I said to my colleague there, let's try to write a story, because she also was on the at the university as a professor. And we said, can we do this?
Mhm.
And so we sat down and we looked at a lot of stories to think, well, how do you construct a story? And that's where it all came about. And
Mhm.
then eventually we very boldly sent what was a pretty, I could say, raw
Mhm.
story to we because in those days you didn't need an agent, you just sent it out.
Yeah.
And I sent it out to Ann Schwartz, who is one of the premier editors in New York City.
Mhm.
And she eventually wound up at Random House, but at that point I think we were at Athenaeum. But anyway, the point was that she said, she got back to us and she said, I there's something here that I like about this story. It was Mr. Semolinas was the first one. And she said, there's something here that I find intriguing, but you've got a lot of work to do. It's a mess. And so,
Mhm.
but oh no, it's like, oh no, now what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, because she's such a great editor, she led us to say things like, well, you don't need to say all that there. Draw
Mhm.
back over here. Give that character a motivation, create, so this is so completely different from academic writing,
Yeah.
and there we were. And she eventually, that raw story became an award winner. And we were very happy that she helped us along. It
Yeah.
was quite a gift.
Every writer needs a strong editor, and every writer has to learn to become a rewriter. That's part of the process, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
the story I'm the story I'm working on right now, I went through a writers group with it,
Mhm.
and they said, "Oh, all right, it's ready to go." And I went back a couple of years later because I had some medical problems I had to deal with. I
Mhm.
came back to it and I read it and I went, "Oh no." And so I'm rewriting it. And
Right.
I think I, I'm liking it better. Let me put it
Yeah.
that way.
That's great. That's great. And that is part of the process that you create something, you love it, it's got the great ideas that you wanted to espouse within the pages, except structurally it might need some changes to better tell the story. So that's all part of the journey. So, Tell us about the book you're working on right now, what its topic is, when you expect it to hopefully get published, and what readers can expect.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's called, the tentative title is The Imposter.
Hmm.
And to get to the bottom line of it is it's about identity theft.
Hmm.
But it's identity theft, not so much a credit card, or some kind of monetary base. It's the identity of a person's soul.
Yeah.
And in this, the story takes place, in my mind, it takes place in the 19th century.
Hmm.
And it, it's a character who is living a good life, but wants something more. And what happens is, by happenstance, um, a prince comes to his island, saved by the lighthouse in which he lives with his family.
Hmm.
And that there's a gift that comes out of that. He's invited to come to the palace in a far off land. If he wants to do that, it's going to be a big risk. And he goes off, and he goes off with a friend. And on the journey, the friend um, destroys his identity to take the other characters so that he can become the person at the palace who is given honor and prestige.
I
And
mean,
so,
that sounds like an amazing story. It sounds like a classic.
well, thank you very much. The story develops from there,
Hmm.
and the the interesting thing about this, and sometimes I have to laugh at it because I in the back of my mind I think, are people going to think I've lost my mind? The main character, Anado, from an early time, understands the language of birds.
Hmm.
And when I wrote about that in my heart, I said, he says, it's birds I'm talking to. I watch them and listen to their singing. Their songs say things to me that I understand. When I talk, they listen to me and talk to me with their songs. Sometimes they come looking for me to tell me things. So
Beautiful.
why I did that was to make this happen within a fantasy sometimes. How do you make it believable? Which almost sounds like a contradiction.
Right.
No, here you've got a story that's like so far-fetched. Well, I worked on it, and I had to find a way to make it logical that he could understand the language of birds. Why not?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is wonderful. I love the mystical elements of it as well. Now, who is your reader for that book? Is that going to be young adult? Is that going to be for us grown-ups, children?
I hope that it's for everybody, but I know that when I was working on it within the writers group, they said this sounds like your first young adult, your
Hmm.
first adolescent book. And I said, okay, I mean, I'll go for it, and we discussed why. These were all writers who were published authors,
Hmm.
so I said, all right, well, let me see. I think it'll move into early young adult. Let me put
Right.
it this
Well,
way.
it's the same with Harry Potter. It's kind of young adult fiction, but grown-ups love it, children love it. I mean, it's one of the first books my children read. They just couldn't put it down, and
Yeah,
when they were 6 years old, they were reading it.
that's
So,
right. Yeah.
yeah. So if it's the right story, it'll keep them transfixed, which is great. And let's say a Hollywood producer came to you and said, I want to take one of your books and turn it into a movie. Which one would you choose and why?
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess why not Lucas in the game of chance? I mean,
Hmm.
it's pretty dramatic when you think about it, especially when he's walking through that forest and meets those very weird characters who are also very demanding, and like the dried up river and the three sisters who are like the three Greek fates, and so I think there's a lot there visually
Hmm.
that could make an interesting story. The forest itself could be very intriguing as a character.
Absolutely.
So I think I would like to see Lucas move into the film world.
That'd be great. And would you choose live action or would you choose animation?
No, I think I would probably, that's a good question. I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to see both.
Yeah.
To work with a producer who would say, well, if we're gonna let's create an animation character, an
Hmm.
animated character. All right, well, let me just see what would Lucas look like,
Yeah.
and I might go that route, or else it would be. I wonder how it could be with this. I always think of the story taking place in medieval times,
Mhm.
so it might be interesting to see how that is constructed as a setting.
Exactly. With CGI and all of the computer graphics nowadays, they can create anything. You can create medieval times, prehistorical times,
Yes.
futuristic times, and they all look real, which is the magic of living in this great century when we live now. We talked a little bit before we got started. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your environmental inspiration. You live on a farm in the Midwest, 8 acres in a log cabin. That all sounds like the idyllic place for a author to live.
It is in many ways. Not many people have said it that way, but it's yeah, my I'm in a study right now in I guess you could call it an office. I like to think of it as my 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 perch,
Hmm.
and I when I look out this window here, I see the woods,
Hmm.
and whatever season it is, it's inspiring,
Yeah.
and sometimes what happens if I get a little stuck as a writer, I just put the computer on sleep,
Hmm.
get out there, look up, look up, look up, because once I start doing that, this place has been cultivated from for about 40 years. And so
Hmm.
there are a lot of perennials and a lot of plants that survive in the winter as well as in the summer and spring. And so it's a magical place to go. And so, yes, it's very inspiring.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, where you live is inspiring. Your book is inspired as well. It is called Loukas and the Game of Chance, Anthony Manna's wonderful novel. It takes readers on a journey through a reimagined Greek folktale. When Loukas, a flute player, befriends a mysterious snake, he is rewarded with fortune, but later loses everything due to pride and greed. Sounds kind of like a Greek tragedy in a way, or a Greek folktale, of course. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you very much, Logan. I've appreciated it a hundredfold, and you take good care.
I
And
appreciate your time, sir. And to our folks at home who are watching, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.